Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a parallel evolution of laughter and history with Professor Elizabeth Storter Pryor, who for the first time is teaching a class at Smith College about her famous father, Richard Pryor.
But first, words, because on Wednesday, we words.
And although we've already talked about our local dictionary and some of the other global English dictionaries' words of the year for 2025...
one final group waits until the week of the first weeks of this year, the next year, to make their decisions collectively.
How were your breaks?
Good.
Did you get to Quebec?
To Toronto? No, I did
Toronto.
not. I came to Turner's Falls to talk to an FX artist for the show.
Instead of going to Toronto.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I have no comment about this.
Monty says, you didn't have to come. And to that I say, you do enough alone.
Well, welcome back.
Thanks. I made a ham also from scratch, which was fun.
Nice.
Raised the pig and everything.
Well, not that much from scratch.
No, we've talked about ham before, and I'm curious about what.
Yeah, but that before we were talking about lamb ham, and that's still going to be a thing that I do for Easter this year. I have it on my calendar when I need to buy my leg.
Monty, did you go anywhere?
Puerto Rico.
Oh, nice.
We went the day after the airport was closed for 24 hours because we invaded Venezuela. But we were there just in the nick of time to be able to go on our trip.
Oh, I'm glad. Your flights were okay?
Yeah, that was the least of the problems that that invasion caused, but it was a problem.
Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about?
We are going to talk about the final big word of the year for 2025 from the American Dialect Society.
Wait, did they have their meeting already?
Yes.
Oh!
Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, our dictionary in Springfield, Massachusetts. We talked about Merriam-Webster's word of the year at the end of last year, which was slop, AI-based slop. But the American Dialect Society is something that you are a part of that also has their word of the year. Tell us what the American Dialect Society is if people haven't been following this.
The American Dialect Society is an organization that anyone can join, but its members are primarily linguists and professors of linguistics or other language-related topics, and lexicographers, and also, but really anybody who is interested in language. So the American Dialect Society is the organization that started the whole Word of the Year thing. While Merriam-Webster's Word of the Year is determined based on the people who look up things at merriam-webster.com, the American Dialect Society's Word of the Year is chosen by the members of the society. And so anyone in the weeks leading up to the event, because it happens at a conference, this year the conference was in New Orleans. I did not get to go. But on January 9th, they had the election, and all these different words had been nominated for various categories, including Word of the Year, but also other categories that we'll get into. Anyone can nominate them, and then there's a big boisterous discussion, and people make the case for whatever their top choice is, and then the members vote.
It reminds me of old school primaries.
Yeah, and sometimes on Twitter or other social media platforms, you can see people documenting what the discussion is like, and it's fascinating.
Interesting.
Yes. Do you know what word they chose?
I did not look it up. I didn't want to ruin the magic. I wanted to save it for this conversation with you, Emily Brewster. What word did the American Dialect Society acclaim as the word of the year 2025?
Do you remember what it was for 2024?
No.
It was raw dog.
Oh, yes. We have talked about this so many times on the show, much to the dismay of our director, Tony Dunn.
And me too.
On my plane trip to San Juan, apart from sleeping, which I don't know if that counts in the whole raw dogging an airline trip.
I think it counts.
I did not watch a movie or read anything. I only watched the screen with the plane moving, so I was a little proud of me. Incorporating that 2025 word of the year into my trip to Puerto Rico.
Well, the 2024 word.
2024 word,
So,
right.
Understanding that was the choice for 2024, do either of you want to venture a guess about the American Dialect Society's 2025 word of the year?
Is this where your 6-7 finally shines?
I'm going to go back to 6-7 and say 6-7.
That was indeed a nominee for that top category of word of the year. How about you, Khalees?
I have no idea.
This surprised me. The American Dialect Society's 2025 word of the year is slop.
So they just copied Merriam-Webster?
or they agreed. which is interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, I'm certain nobody was interested in copying any other organization to choose this word of the year. The people chose this word because of its significance in our lives in the year of our Lord 2025. Their definition of slop, just to clarify what they mean by it, it doesn't conflict with Merriam-Webster's definition, but it's defined in their text as low quality, high quantity content, most typically produced by generative AI. It's also used as a combining form for anything lacking value produced in mass quantities.
It's funny how much I keep seeing pop up. Even their TV commercials, I'll be watching the NFL playoffs and I'll be looking and thinking, is this AI? These characters, like everything seems so fake all of a sudden.
I mean, there's certain tells to it often.
Yeah. How long will we be able to tell those tells is the question.
Well, the question is, will they be able to teach them around it? And the answer right now seems to be no.
Well, there are also all of these AI folks that are hiring poets. Like, imagine being a poet and getting paid $150 a day, which is a lot for a poet, to train AI to do poetry. So how long is the slop going to remain slop?
That's a question of like rent versus integrity. That is a personal conversation with you and your maker.
But the slop continues, yes.
This little conversation that we're having draws to my mind one of the words that was in the most useful category at the American Dialect Society's Word of the Year vote. This is the one that won in the most useful category. It's a phrase, that's AI.
That everyone sends to their older relatives.
Right.
Oh, so many times this year. And I try not to call people out on social media, but anytime you see a picture of a celebrity that looks like they're crying on Facebook, I can almost promise you it is AI. Bob Dylan was not at the Kennedy Center Awards in the Oval Office crying. Rachel Maddow was not rescuing people in boats in the South crying.
Who on your feed is doing this?
They share all these things. I'm like, look at the pictures carefully. This is not them. That's AI. It is a useful phrase.
Yes. They define it as a statement of distrust when determining that something presented as real, such as an image, is in fact AI generated.
What were some of the other categories and words that were voted by the American Dialect Society just earlier this month?
And
Emily
now I will
Brewster?
say I am looking at the press release because I was curious about what else got nominated.
I'm still not cheating.
In the most likely to succeed category, they have the adjective chopped, meaning ugly or undesirable. Is this one that either of you is familiar with?
Yes, but not with regular use.
Yeah, I'm on the periphery. It has started to enter into conversations that I have heard, but I probably would have gotten it wrong if you asked me what chopped meant.
This one's interesting to me because I think it is evidence of the fact that many of the members who are there are in colleges and universities regularly. They have a more concentrated view of the language of people in their early 20s.
I thought you were going to say because all the people that were there were themselves chopped. How rude of you to think that, Emily Brewster.
No. Linguists are the most attractive people on the planet.
Clearly. The librarian type.
But like looking in that category, I love that Unk is in that category. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to us about Unk, which is another one that has entered the periphery.
Unk just means old person. Yeah, it's not particularly respectful. It's not, you'd rather be called an OG than an Unk.
I feel like Unk has nuances to me that in its use in greater public doesn't necessarily have because of its origins in AAV.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of respect to it, but there's also a little bit of disdain that comes from that. But I also love just kind of using it.
They also use it in The Bear quite a bit in a way that is kind of on the edge there, but it's somebody that they clearly love but also hate at the same time. They call Unk all the time. So it's definitely shifting towards the more pejorative, I think.
The winner for the political word of the year is icy conditions.
Oof.
Used as a coded phrase alerting that ice has been spotted in a neighborhood.
Yikes. That one is...
I think it's a clever one, though.
It is clever, although I have a feeling if people are already scanning your modes of communication, they're going to figure that one out rather quickly.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, or not. It's a beautiful phrase because it implies nuance.
Yeah.
And not to quote a BBC series, but like often in modern day, subtext is reviled because people who use subtext are cowards. So like maybe they'll get it and maybe they won't. I mean, it's in this, but also like intellectuals are to be reviled.
Well, if you ever hear of icy conditions here in the 413, do let us know. And we're not talking just to you, Dave Hayes, the weather nut, or Brian Lapis.
Right, but the fact is that the ambiguity of the word or the dual job that the term does is useful and also potentially very confusing
and scary.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're as cold as ice.
More coming up with word nerd Emily Brewster as we explore more of the winners from their many 2025 lists at the American Dialect Society, including one that Monty's been touting ever since the best of possibilities started percolating.
After which, we'll explore the ways in which Richard Pryor changed the comedic and historic landscape of the nation through a class at Smith College being taught by his daughter, Elizabeth Storter Pryor.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Tell us more from the American Dialect Society. Emily Brewster, resident wordster for Merriam-Webster, our dictionary in Springfield.
Well, the digital word of the year was slop also. It's words can succeed in more than one category, but the runner-up for the digital word of the year is clanker, which is a pejorative term for AI agents and robots.
This is a
Clanker,
Star Wars
yeah.
word, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I think
I
that's
like
what they
that one.
call the droids in Star Wars when you look at the Clone Wars and some of the post-prequel Star Wars universe. Clanker gets used a lot as a derogatory term for robots.
But in Star Wars, that would mean that clanker is a racial slur
I guess you're right, if robots are a race.
because droids are a race.
So maybe we shouldn't use it then. I don't want to be racist.
Man, this is a giant aside, but I ran a Star Wars game once where doing the thing where droids are a race, you can play them as a racial character, and someone was doing this in my game, and I'm like, you can't do that. That's a slur. And they're like, it's just droids. And I'm like, you're looking at the black DM and saying they're just droids? I think you should take a minute and think about this.
More
That's
of
really interesting.
it is.
Yeah. And we're like, yeah, we're going to have none of that talk at this table.
I know the Brewster Janke family is a big Star Wars family, or at least was. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This relates to all of us. Stop using racial slurs for droids, even if the American Dialect Society has it as a runner-up.
They don't have consciousnesses yet, but
Right,
when they
right,
do.
but do AI agents and robots?
That's what we're getting ever closer to. Interesting times we live in.
All right, the next category is informal word of the year. And here, Monty, is where your word shines.
Finally! 6-7.
6'7", I just bit right on the highway.
6'7".
I don't
You
love the
bet.
word. I just love the phenomenon.
I love their definition for it. Interjection containing little semantic content.
Yeah.
It's also funny because this word is going to die on the vine if it hasn't already. It feels like even after the year switched over to 2026, 6-7 was over.
We can hope.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about what remnants of 6-7 will exist in 10 years. Certainly, everybody who's in elementary school right now will remember it.
It'll have a certain nostalgia, but it's not going to be something that is going to annoy classrooms going forward into the future much longer. Luckily, grown-ups ruined this word for the kids, which was our intent all along, so that you would stop using it. We literally had a long conversation on the March for the Food Bank strategizing about how to ruin this word for kids so that they'll stop doing this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we won. We won that battle.
Interesting.
Took 6 or
Ruining
7
words
tries.
for children
Oh.
everywhere,
Yeah.
huh?
Yep.
That's your MO.
That is my MONTE. What else we got from the American Dialect Society?
Most creative word of the year is, I love this one actually, reheat nachos. It's a verb. It means to redo something, such as music, often in an inferior fashion.
I love it. I love it.
So if you have like a bad cover, you would call it reheat
yeah,
nachos?
it's reheat nachos.
Yes.
And same thing with like remaking movies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you're just reheating nachos, man.
Which you can do okay if you use an oven, but don't put them in
But
the
why?
microwave.
Like, are they ever going to be, I mean, when you still have the fresh nachos? Like, because the fresh nachos aren't gone. So you could still have the fresh nachos.
Yeah, and frankly, like, eat them cold. Like, when you reheat melted cheese, it just turns worse. The
Yeah.
fat is already separated. You can't go back.
All right. I really love the runner-up, or the second most creative word of the year in the American Dialect Society's vote, which is amphifa. It's spelled AMPHIFA, and it's defined as a playful resistance movement as seen in Amphibians Against Fascism in Portland.
Oh yeah, like those people that were like furries or whatever that were dressed up in
Dressed
like
up as
frogs.
and going
Yeah,
to dance
yeah.
outside of ICE detention centers.
Amphifa.
Yeah, I don't think they were properly furries, right? Like they were
No.
in
Right.
big inflatable,
Yep.
like
Yeah.
nylon costumes.
Amphifa.
Amphifa. I also really love the next one in this category, which is fridge cigarette. It's a euphemism for an ice cold Diet Coke or similar drink taken from a refrigerator as a refreshment.
A fridge cigarette.
I guess the idea being that this is an indulgence that's not good for you at all. And
Both-
it's cold.
Both reheat nachos and fridge cigarette. And I think there's one more on here. Oh, body tea. I love them, but it's like one step closer to doublespeak,
Like in the 1984
like in
sense?
1984 cents.
Well, I would love a fridge cigarette
Is it double plus good?
and a cigarette and also reheated nachos. All that sounds great.
Blech. I really like, we've talked about cooked before
Mm-hmm.
and also let someone cook, right? To let someone cook means to let them do their thing,
Yeah.
to let them like get in their groove and present or do what they're trying to do. But if we are cooked, it means we have failed. We're in a terrible situation. And then now we also have chopped being ugly and undesirable. I really like all this food stuff because I like food. Also under the political word of the year category, there's taco, which they defined as Trump always chickens out.
That had a lot of traction early on in 2025, so it's interesting that
Yeah,
made it.
Yeah.
I also like Great Meme Reset, which I had no idea about.
I
What is
just
that?
learned about that. Well, it's this idea that starting 12 days ago, there was going to be, by, I don't know, Gen Z, I guess, was going to do a great meme reset, somehow erase all the existing memes and start afresh with the idea that memes would go back to something akin to what they were in around the 2010s.
Yeah, it's like Gen Alpha's Y2K.
Yeah, they were just sad they didn't get their own Y2K, so they're going to reset all the memes.
I wonder if this means they're going to be rejecting Italian brain rot.
Talk about Italian
know,
brain rot. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the digital words of the year for the ADS's list. They define it as mock Italian memes with generative AI characters like Bombardiero, Coccodillo, and Ballerina Cappuccina.
Kids love these things.
They do.
The American Dialect Society list of words, like whatever shows up in the short list, is just this fascinating snapshot of American speech that will never not be entertaining.
I agree. I'm really disappointed that I didn't get to help with the definitions like I did last year.
Or go to New Orleans, where the society was meeting this past year.
Right. Last time it was in Philadelphia, which I loved. But
Anything else
I'd like to go to
rise to the top of the American Dialect Society and catch your attention, Emily Brewster?
Well, there are a few more that I think are especially interesting. Another informal word of the year is body tea, as in TEA, a noun defined as attractive physical appearance. It's a reinterpretation of the phrase her body tea.
I don't know that other phrase that it's a reinterpretation.
I know, I don't either. But again, it's in that edibles category.
It's new phrasing for thick.
Ah.
Oh.
When I think of tea, it's like spill the tea now. That's how
Right.
that's the new meaning of tea in my world.
Yeah, but if you're taking tea as truth, which it is in that, like, spill the truth,
Yeah.
and if your body is truth, that's a good thing.
Yeah, okay. I like that.
So,
Yeah. I also like glaze. Do you know glaze as a verb? This one is also in the category of most likely to succeed.
yes.
It means effusively compliment in a cringeworthy fashion.
Like
So you
glazing a
might
donut.
Glaze, like glazing someone who you really want to have a positive impression of you. It's sycophancy.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Cronies will glaze.
Yes, right. There's some boot licking involved, but
Yes.
it doesn't sound as bad, right? Evoking donuts is definitely more palatable.
Boot licking with brown noses.
We've seen so many people do that. That could be the political word of the year as well. Well, Emily Brewster, we appreciate you giving us this insight into the society that you are a part of, that you have also helped to define words for over the years, not only defining words for our fair dictionary in Springfield, the illustrious Merriam-Webster, but for the American Dialect Society, who has also acclaimed your word of the year at Merriam-Webster as their word of the year with slop, but with lots of other fun runners-up in other categories as well.
Indeed.
If you have a question for the Word Nerd as we forge forth into 2026, you can email us here at thefab413@nepm.org, and we'll ask the Word Nerd. If all of your kids come home saying strange things from school and you don't understand what they mean, that's what the dictionary is there for, to help us. Thanks, Emily Brewster.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you, Felice.
6-7, I just bit right on the highway.
Hopefully that's the last time we ever hear that song.
One can hope. And now we'll introduce you to Smith professor Elizabeth Pryor, who this year is teaching a class and releasing a book about her father's influence on the American landscape and more.
And if we do not properly convey how much we want to take this class, we will not have done our jobs properly.
I think we did, though. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Eastside Grill, celebrating 40 years in downtown Northampton, serving steaks, seafood, and American cuisine to the Pioneer Valley and beyond. Open Wednesday through Monday, eastsidegrill.com.
On December 1st of last year, Smith College professor Elizabeth Storter Pryor posted on Facebook, "Today would have been my dad's 85th birthday. I think about him every day. His birthday makes me reflect on his quiet voice, his throaty chuckle, and the amazing advice he gave me, even though he rarely followed it himself. I am also excited and nervous and honored to share that next semester, for the first time ever, I'm going to teach a course about my father, Richard Pryor's America. I love the idea of combining the personal and the historical, family history and America's history. There's so much richness to be learned from his life, his influence, and his unique point of view. Students will study his comedy alongside major moments in 20th century Black history. I can't wait to share snippets of the experience as it unfolds."
And here to share some of the snippets of this new Smith College class and give us a preview of the forthcoming book, Something We Said, Richard Pryor, A Notorious Word, and me, is Smith College professor Elizabeth Storter Pryor. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us. This seems fascinating. I want to take this class.
Yeah, that was how I originally reached out to you, said, I want to audit this class. And I thought maybe it would be better if we all get a preview kind of audit as a radio family.
Well, and not just because like this class and the subject matter is fascinating, but weirdly, on a purely academic level, how often do you get to take a class with firsthand accounts?
Right.
It's very rare. This is a very special sort of thing. And the fact that it's about somebody that was so influential on a lot of the progress of American thought and Black American thought is even better.
Liz, you've been a Smith College professor for a long time,
Yeah.
and people who know of you being the daughter of the legendary Richard Pryor. What made you finally say, you know what, I'm going to teach a class about my dad?
First of all, thank you for having me. But yeah, well, it's been such a journey that started in my classroom, actually my first year at Smith. And a student in that class quoted a line from the film Blazing Saddles, which my father co-wrote. And I thought she was going in one direction with it, but she wasn't.
Yeah.
And then quoted the line which had the N-word in it. And I actually kind of flipped out in that moment, because as much as I had thought I prepped for teaching, I'd never thought about, like, wait, what happens when these kind of racisms, and even though the student was not calling anybody a name or not being nasty or anything like that, just quoting a line actually that I'm confident my father wrote, right?
And it's a brilliant and funny line.
And a brilliant and funny line. But it kind of sent me on a journey of thinking first as a teacher about, how do we grapple with this kind of language, especially in courses that are rooted in the history of race in the United States, which should be all history courses in the U.S.
Indeed.
But as I started to, follow through that journey, I started to see how central my father was a figure in this conversation, and became more deeply and deeply connected to his work and started engaging with it myself, and it just kind of unfolded from there.
In building this syllabus, your father has a huge catalog to try and pick from. What made the parts that your students are going to be approaching the ones that were more like key moments for you, and how you wanted this course to work?
This is such an experiment for me right now. So it's like, I don't even know the answer to that. Some of them are so intuitive. And, I'll probably find out as I'm teaching it, which is unfortunately how I discover how I've made some of those choices along the way, but often. But I think some of the standouts for me, the starting point, which is like the history of Black humor, something that my dad thought a lot about, especially on an album of his called Bicentennial N-Word.
Mm-hmm.
You all know how Black humor started. It started in slave ships, Cat was always where we were rowing. The dude said, "What you laughing about, man?" I said, "Yesterday I was a king."
So that became like a no-brainer for me, because he was basically saying, Black humor starts in slavery and it starts in the slave ships. That's what he said. Building off of that, I just kind of thought about these moments that for me stood out. One of the histories for my father that has always been something I've wanted to know more about and don't feel like I fully understand or fully see is the way in which, coming out of a home that was devoted to sex work, that was the family business. And, he jokes a lot about sex, and he talks about being raised by his grandmother, who was a madam and ran this business. But I've just always been fascinated by that. So in some ways, even though I've just written this book that is in some ways a microbiography of my dad, but really a story of our relationship, my relationship to the N-word and the history of the N-word, all those three tied together, I think it was about the things I wanted to understand more to contextualize him and his life. So I'm kind of using my students to help me go through that journey.
We're speaking with Smith College professor Elizabeth Storter Pryor, who is going for the first time to teach a course about her dad at Smith College this coming semester, Richard Pryor's America. And there's a forthcoming book in June from Simon & Schuster called Something We Said, Richard Pryor, A Notorious Word, and Me. Let's talk a little bit about the you part of this, and especially you in the context of your dad, who looms large in the psyche of American culture and American comedy. And to me, he's like the Muppet Movie and The Toy and The Wiz and Brewster's Millions. He was a movie star, Superman, all of these things. But to you, he was your dad. Tell us about the man Richard Pryor and give us a glimpse into who he was as your dad.
I don't know why this is kind of bringing tears to my eyes, but it's so funny because the way you just described it, so big. I mean, he was larger than life in all these ways, and in other ways, so quiet in the way that he expressed himself. And that's something I got in touch with as I started to think about our relationship. One of the bizarre connections to this whole story was that as I started to think about that moment in my classroom and to think about how it was linking me back to my dad, I also thought about the first conversation we ever had together. I was about 7 years old, meaningful conversation, and it was about the N-word.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was my father telling me, don't let nobody call you that. But the way he said that quietly, the way he was a strong presence.
The radio audience did not get to see the face that was associated
You can
with
hear
that.
You can hear in the tone.
He wasn't necessarily a movie star, but he was just one of these people that to be seen by him and understood by him. It's funny because I was, raised mostly in my mom's home, although back and forth with my dad. He was very much like the 70s Wednesday night, every other weekend kind of father. And then he'd disappear and then come back and get back into that ritual and regimen. But thinking about him and our relationship, it became this driving force for me in the book in a way I never kind of expected it to, because I didn't, I'm a historian. I don't think about writing about myself. I did not mean to write a memoir. I will say that.
I do remember that when we talked several years ago, I knew you were working on a book and it was going to be called The N-Word. So I was really surprised when I saw that it was now that book plus memoir, which I think is actually fantastic and important because, your dad's relationship to that word is iconic. It's hard to listen to, especially kind of the early period comedy and the comedy albums and the names of the Grammy award-winning albums that I'm not even going to say and shouldn't on the air. And then he changed his opinion on relationship to that word.
But I think it's also every person's relationship with that word is incredibly personal.
Yeah.
Some people are way more okay with it, and some people are very much not okay with it. But I don't think any of us can deny how historically important it is.
Yeah, and your dad's piece in that is historically important as well.
I think that's part of the reason that the book ended up being about me, because in some ways the N-word it becomes like pinpoints on a map of my life as a Black woman, as a biracial woman in the United States. And so many of these very intimate moments that I have with the N-word, that's kind of becomes the structure of the book, is to follow me through these intimate moments. And it is different for everyone. It's different for me, raised as I was by, a white Jewish woman, even though I had this father larger than life putting it on his albums. He disavows the word towards the end of his career. He makes a choice, kind of a profound choice. He goes to Africa and kind of has this diasporic epiphany where he is like, wait a minute, I don't think this word works here in the way it does in the United States. And I'm not sure I want to be connected to it in the way that I was there, because he sees Black people all over the place. And it doesn't have the same relevance to him there.
When we began this conversation, you talked about the student, I'm assuming white student, who used a quote, quoting the N-word. It is a word. It is a powerful word, but it is still just a word. So how in academia do you look at this going forward? How do you think people in academia look at this kind of thing going forward? It's super complicated. And it's interesting for me as a parent to hear my 12-year-old sing along with Kendrick Lamar all the time, but how wonderful he is at editing that one word out, and how grateful I am that he is as well. But especially in an academic context, surely there might be times where you would say, well, should we use this? Can we use this?
I mean, that's sort of the central academic question of my journey. And for me, the way that I imagine intellectual engagement and collaboration is I want to invite everybody to the table. In my classroom, if everybody's talking, I'm like, rubbing, my fists against my chest. I'm like, good job. And I know that there are certain ways of speaking certain words, and 100% freedom of speech is under assault right now in really profound and frightening ways. So my perspective isn't necessarily about censorship, I don't think. That's not how I see it. But I see myself as wanting to have as many people in the conversation as possible. And I know they won't be if this word is said.
Totally.
And that's how I
love telling white people, you can say that word if you want to, but why do you want to? Why should you want to? It does have this super divisive quality to it. And so it's always confounding to me.
But at the same time, like when it appears, especially in historical document, it's very telling and very important to keep there so that you see what the language was really like.
Yeah.
And it's not cleaned up for like later audiences, which is the thing that makes going back and listening to those older specials, those older albums from Richard Pryor really interesting, because for me in my almost 50-year-old body, it feels more like history lesson than like comedy. It's such a weird shift to feel, especially because like I grew up with those albums, and with my parents having those albums, with me taking them out and playing them because my parents were 20 and didn't know what they were doing in the early 80s. And I was like, oh, this cover is pretty. I remember enjoying it and kind of not really understanding everything that was going on, but definitely laughing because there were people laughing. And it's been a minute since I listened to them, but like I know those bits, and how they read for me now is way more like, this is actually like history lesson. It's not comedy. And I'm curious to see if your students will feel the same way.
As a history professor and as the daughter of the person who's making these albums, Elizabeth Stewart Pryor, talking about Richard Pryor.
Right. I mean, he's breaking knowledge. There's no question about it. And he's saying it in a way that people hadn't said it before. He has such a charm and vulnerability as a performer that allows audiences of, mixed race audiences to really lean in and hear what he's saying, but he's saying stuff. Mm-hmm. What's fascinating to me is my students don't know who he is. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the culture shift. It's like, I grew up literally everywhere I went, people would say to me, any relation? Yeah. Like I just had to see my name. And my students and, my kids are 24 and 27. Some of their friends know it now just because they wanted to find it. They love comedy, and that they, went down a rabbit hole and found Richard Pryor. But a lot of my students, it's kind of like when I was growing up and knew a name like Cary Grant or something, where I kind of knew these figures, or I thought I knew who they were, or I thought I knew what they did. I mean, he's hilarious, brilliantly, geniusly funny. And I think part of what makes it brilliantly, geniusly funny is that history lesson you're talking about. So I'm really excited for my students, not just to kind of connect them to Richard Pryor work in general, but for them to like be able to have their own experience, because they didn't grow up like we did. With all my friends said exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
That they snuck the albums from their parents. I mean, literally every friend I
literally
ever had.
didn't have to sneak. My parents were just really bad at things.
But when you listen to them, it does sound like a historical piece, but so much of the stuff is still very relevant, especially the jokes that he's making about cops and police stops. It's as relevant today as it was 50 years ago when that album was created, and probably 50 years before that with somebody that might not have had as big a platform telling the same kind of stories in the same way. So it's both of those things at the same time. It's hard not to listen to That N-Word's Crazy, which won the Grammy for Comedy Album of the Year, and not see how much of it is still super relevant today. So I'm very excited to see how the students of today will react to that.
See, white folks get a ticket, they pull over. Hey, officer, yes, glad to be of help. Here you go. Got to be talking about, I am reaching into my pocket for my license. Because I don't want to be no accident.
And that is one of the things on the syllabus as part of your brand new class about your dad, Richard Pryor's America, which will be at Smith this coming semester. What are some of the other things you're really excited to share with the Smith College students about your dad from his catalog?
Well, I can't wait to show them the concert film Live in Concert.
Mm-hmm.
It is start to finish chef's kiss.
This is fun part for me when the white people come back after intermission and find out niggas done stole their seats.
Weren't we sitting here, dear? Weren't we, I believe, we were sitting here, weren't we?
Yes, we were sitting right there.
Well, you ain't sitting here now, mother.
It's so perfect in every way. And what I love especially about that is that it's the father that I remember. Like when I'm thinking about my father, that's who I remember. Shortly after that, I mean, very shortly after that, within the year, my father had like a tragic accident where he was using drugs and was in a fire. So his body looked different. His physicality changed. And then within a few years was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So like there's something about that album for me on a personal level where it's just the memory of my father in all of his vibrancy. And then also I learned doing this book and doing this research that he invented the comedy stand-up 1 hour special, essentially. They didn't have that before. And so this was the first film like it made. And it's genius for that reason too, but also because I lived through so many of those moments.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he starts talking about, shooting a car, and I was there when he did it.
And it seemed fair to kill my car to me, right? Because my wife was going to leave my ass.
I said, not in this mother, you ain't. No, Lord. No, if you leave, you'll be driving them hush puppies you got on.
And I had one of them big old magnums, you know that noise they make when you shoot something? I shot a tire, said, boom! Tire said, ah! It got good to me. I shot another one. Boom! I shot the motor fell out the motor, right?
Motor say, and then the police came. I went in the house.
Because they got magnums too.
And so the album just has so many layers, and I cannot wait to share that one with my students.
This class isn't just material from your father, but talk about like some of the other material that you've brought in to try and give your father's work a little more context, a little more meat.
There's two elements, not on my syllabus yet, but what I'm working through now is we really like to train our students in research methods. So part of this for me is a family history. So I'm inviting my students to bring in their own element of family history and to figure out how does it become like family history and how does it become American history? Like, how do we make that transition between it just being a story that we tell within our own family and become something bigger? Sure, my father was famous. That seems like a natural connection, but actually I'm doing a lot of contextualizing. I'm talking about Black Power, which certainly helped shape his voice in the early 70s. All of the comedy that people are most familiar with of Richard Pryor and the ones that are Grammy Award winning come out of that Black Power tradition. So we're going to be reading about Black Power. We're going to read about the Great Migration, enslavement. We'll look at works on sex work and also thinking about Africa in the Black imagination, which was very important in the 70s with Alex Haley's Roots, about his own life and that thinking, that own connection. But I remember my father coming into my room and telling me that he was doing this genealogy, and he was so excited about making those kinds of connections before he actually did his trip to Africa, which he actually did kind of differently. He didn't go to West Africa. He went to East Africa. He went to Kenya. But with that said, he was on that journey too. So I want to connect students to thinking about the bigger context and also these, huge 20th century moments in Black history.
I'm just so thrilled to be here. Over here in America, I'm so glad y'all took me out to die, homie. I used to live to be 150. Now I die of high blood pressure.
Now coming up with Smith professor Elizabeth Pryor as we delve deeper into that one word, a word that her father Richard Pryor used fairly often.
And exploring the impact of the use of that word after his work with it and after he intentionally stopped using it.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Dean's Beans Organic Coffee, a locally based, worker-owned company committed to social and environmental responsibility, roasting fair trade, organic, shade-grown coffee since 1993. DeansBeans.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar in Hatfield, offering personalized solar energy solutions and ongoing customer care, proudly serving communities throughout the Pioneer Valley. Northeast-solar.com.
We're speaking with Elizabeth Storter Pryor, who's a Smith College professor who for the first time is teaching a course about her father, Richard Pryor's America, that she'll teach this coming semester. Also in June, a forthcoming book, Something We Said, Richard Pryor, A Notorious Word and Me, which I can't wait to read. And we'll have you back on when that book comes out for sure.
Oh, please. You please. Us please.
That book is part memoir and an exploration of the notorious word, the N-word that we keep referencing here. But Richard Pryor, as we mentioned before, was a larger-than-life star. Are there people, when you look back at your childhood, do you ever think back like, oh, I was at home and X person walked in the house and I had no context of who they were then, but now I can't believe that I was in the same room as
No,
fill in the blank.
100%. And I mean, I don't know if I didn't know then, but there was a picture that my dad always had hanging on the wall of me running around in a bathing suit, hair wet, with Sammy Davis Jr., for example.
Yeah. That's an interesting childhood to have.
Right.
Like you do.
Right, exactly. There's a great one. My father took me to the Oscars when I was about 9 as his date, and there's a great picture of me and him, and he's throwing a fake punch at Muhammad Ali because I'm sitting on Muhammad Ali's lap.
So my goodness.
So there's these wonderful, wonderful memories. Michael Jackson at a roller skating party.
Wow.
My dad had a roller skating party one year, and everybody was on skates, including Michael. So there are a lot of really interesting people like that. Paul Mooney was always around, who was another Black comedian, but lots of interesting people. We actually met Cary Grant, who I mentioned earlier, at the races. He took me to the races, and he had a philosophy, because I was so shy, and I still sort of am in my way, and didn't know what to do when I saw somebody that I admired. And he said, you always go up and tell them you admire their work. And I think this is different than just going up and saying, I recognize you, or I say whatever. But if you have something to say about someone's work, you should always go up and let them know.
In putting this together and working on your book, are there any works of your father's that you're still kind of struggling with?
I mean, I think in some ways that's kind of the central premise of my journey, which is that my father landed in a very different place than I did, especially at the beginning of his career. I mean, he ended up elsewhere, but at the beginning of his career, this word was super authentic for him. And it super wasn't for me, just from where I came from. Even though he was my father, it just wasn't my truth. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but it's interesting because I wasn't familiar with his work in the way that I am now coming into this project. I think there's a little bit of that osmosis. Like, I know who he is. You know,
He's my dad.
Right. I saw him live. Like, what else do I need to do? But I didn't really know his body of work. And I think of many hesitations, and there were many, one of them was like, am I going to be turned off or offended or not get it? And I never had that experience. I had the experience like every time he used that word, it was well appointed. He was conscious and connected. But I will say, in that first conversation I ever had with him about the N-word, because I had been called it at school, I do not remember him ever saying the word. So one of the funny things in my own memories is I don't fully remember him saying this word at home. That's interesting to me, but I don't know if that's just a trick of memory or because when we were younger, you didn't think about people saying, there wasn't an alternative of not saying it. So it was just like, you know, I don't remember him saying, you know, baby cakes either, but he might have said, you know, so I don't know.
It also seems like when you're talking about him, how I think about the nature of more introverted performers and how when you are on stage, you are on. And when you are at home, when you are in safer space, you are not. And that how that word might have been the same for him.
Yeah, I think that's right. I have no doubt that he did. I just don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
What I do remember in that conversation with him is he said that word.
Yeah.
You know, like that I remember.
We're talking about Richard Pryor with Richard Pryor's daughter, Elizabeth Storter Pryor, who is a Smith College professor and teaching a course about her dad, as well as releasing a book that is a memoir and an exploration of this word. I am the only white person in the room right now. And my relationship with this word...
And the only dude.
When I listen to Richard Pryor use that word, or when I listen to Wu-Tang Clan, or when I listen to Kendrick Lamar, I often think about it as a reclamation of this word that has done so much damage. Do you feel like your dad had an important part in reclaiming that word from the damage that it caused for centuries and moved it into a place where it can be used comfortably by your dad and Wu-Tang Clan and Kendrick Lamar, and yet still with the potential for damage?
I mean, the great thing is that what my dad, in a lot of his work, but especially around the N-word, is he was drawing from a long tradition among Black people of using the N-word to signal all kinds of things, very differently than the white racist version used against them, although they could use that too, right? I mean, that's part of my actual historical expertise. The work that I did was doing a deep dive into the way this word was used, you know, since the 18th century. And Black people were using it as a tool of subversion long before my father did on stage. Mm-hmm. But what my father did by using it in this forum with mixed race audiences, in this kind of comedy that was both like kind of searing and satirical, but also charming at the same time, was kind of open it in a way it hadn't been opened before. So taking it out of Black living rooms and bringing it onto the stage, right, in this particular way. And people like Ice Cube and others have credited my father, hip-hop artists have, you know, as one of the influences in the way in which they reclaimed and used this word. And I think he's definitely a driver of that conversation. I wonder how he would feel being identified as that person now with the word in all of its permutations. I mean, it's just taken on a life of its own. It's an American export. There are people in Malaysia using the word.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of complexities. I wish he were around that I could ask him.
And yet the etymology of the word is simply mostly a color. And you have done a lot of history in the research where that word originated.
Yeah, definitely Latin or Dutch roots, meaning the word Black, but then marking Black as having meaning, and not even necessarily as a slur at its beginning, right? Like just a word to identify people who occupied a certain labor category, not something you'd want to belong to, but had that meaning, but really becomes the word that we know it to be when Black people start to step out of that labor category and the word is still attached to them, symbolizing, that they are static, that they cannot move, that you can never fully be American.
It becomes caste instead of occupation.
I can't wait till the book is released later this year.
I want to take this class.
I want to take this class too. We have this show that we have to do every day. So maybe we'll come towards the end of the class. We'll find time to come and talk to some of your students about.
Oh, that would be great.
That would be really fun. We'll audit one of the last classes perhaps and come see what the students of 2020, the class of 2026 thinks about.
It's like what a generation that has grown up without Richard Pryor thinks about this.
And also grown up with the phrase the N-word,
right?
Which is really interesting.
Not only the actual N-word, but the phrase the N-word.
Right, no, exactly. And I hope to be kind of posting little pieces of it on social media. This is going to be an exercise for me in practicing that muscle, but so that when you come back to ask the students, you'll have some point of reference.
We'll follow along on your journey on social media, and we can't wait to have you back, hopefully with your class and with the book later this year. Elizabeth Storter Pryor, Smith College professor, teaching a course about her dad, Richard Pryor's America, and we will have you on later this year about the book, Something We Said, Richard Pryor, A Notorious Word and Me, that Simon & Schuster will be releasing in June.
Can I say like my Instagram?
Please.
Yes.
It's Pryor Histories, Pryor Histories.
I love that. That's so nice.
Our friend and consultant Graham Griffith told me he would pay me if I didn't make that joke during our conversation, and I just want to state for the record that you made that joke, not me.
Show me something natural like Afro.
I mean, that class sounds like just the best.
Absolutely.
The best.
And that was an actual Kendrick Lamar shout out to none other than Richard Pryor, tying it all together.
Indeed. On the next Fabulous 413, it is the actual birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we'll talk with President Shannon Rudder from MLK Family Services in Mason Square here in Springfield, and others about their week of celebrations culminating with the event at the Mass Mutual Center on the observed holiday.
Plus, there are some MLK Day celebrations happening in Amherst at the Eric Carle Museum, and we'll head to the Carle to check out the exhibit Click, which looks at the role and use of photography in children's books.
Plus, our weekly chat with Congressman Jim McGovern returns. If you've got a question for the congressman, email us at thefab413@nepm.org.
Luckily, nothing to talk about since our last conversation.
No, nothing happened at all.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
It's a tough time to be a young person just entering the workforce, sending your first job applications out and hearing back nothing.
Most of them, you didn't even get a response. It was just like waiting to see. Even a rejection would have been nice.
I'm Amy Scott. The challenges of being a 20-something dreaming of a 9-to-5. That's next time on Marketplace.